Hi, DJ. Welcome to the Unhustle podcast. I'm very happy you're able to join us. I've been following your journey for quite a while, and I will let you talk about it, but I just wanted to tell people who are joining us that thanks to your personal transformational journey, you actually set up this sabbatical project, which is dear and near to my heart, to explore how sabbaticals and the individuals who take them could change their lives, and then also work with from a company perspective to see how you can offer that option to more individuals. So you're doing something very meaningful. You've been doing a lot of research, and I want to tap into what you know. I know you're working on the book as well, so we'll get a little preview on the book if you're willing to share. But you've been getting amazing publicity, and wherever I turn, there is DJ DiDonna with Sabbatical. So Time Magazine, Fast Magazine, the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and I watched your TEDx talk in Silicon Valley. So all of these things are awesome. Well done, congratulations, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, as you know, I tracked you down, so I've been a big fan of yours and excited for what you're doing, and we've spent a lot of time in the same parts of the world, and hopefully I'll be visiting you in Baja. So excited to chat.
Yeah, I can't wait to meet with you in person and talk over some margaritas about how do we reimagine the role of work in our lives. So now you and I both talk about the same thing. So let's kick it off. You talk about sabbaticals as a way to have this journey and this transformation. But let's start with first, what is a sabbatical? How do you define it? And then how did you come about this work?
So one of the interesting things about sabbaticals is there's no agreed upon definition, right? Folks, I think, use the term because it's what academics have done in the past. It lends some sort of prestige and legitimacy to what you're doing. It sounds better than I'm having a midlife crisis or whatever is actually going on.
I'm having an existential crisis.
It was cool in our research to see folks who had the courage to call it, to say, no, I don't use that word. I just called it my year of exploring or year of travel. I certainly didn't have that sort of confidence when I took off. But
no,
no, I mean, I was, burnt. I was at the end of a burnout journey, right? But one thing we've tried to do is actually establish a definition that works more broadly, which is extended time, intentionally away from routine work. So extended meaning, I don't want to disqualify anyone's sabbatical, but what we found is that it can take up to 6 to 8 weeks to really kind of be present and be yourself again, especially if it's been a long time. Intentional, meaning that, if you quit your job or you lose your job then is to look for another job. And so by looking for another job, you're not kind of holding that time and space sacred for not working. And routine work, a lot of people do some sort of work, whether it's writing a book or doing an internship or practicing some skill or getting some accreditation like yoga or scuba. But it has to be pretty different from your existing work, or else it's just going to kind of activate the same things.
You don't really call that work, though, do you? I mean, getting certified with scuba is kind of like, in my eyes, it's like real play, right? I mean, I wouldn't call it work. So yeah. I mean, writing a book could be it's a creative project, right? But it's work. It's very, as you and I know, it's actually very intense work. But it could also be a very healing work. I found out working on my book during the pandemic that it was a great place for me to be, because you just forget about everything else, right?
Totally. Yeah. I think I was on the other side of Lake Tahoe from you while that was happening.
It's still happening. Yeah. So thanks for that definition. How you mentioned you were a burnout or at the end of burnout?
Yeah. What happened? I kind of think about it as a spectrum. In our research, and we interviewed 50 people kind of in depth for an academic study, and then I've talked to hundreds of folks kind of informally. We came up with this way of thinking about it as functional workaholism. So you've heard of like functional alcoholism, where most people outside of that individual wouldn't realize that there was a problem, and so they're able to kind of continue to function in society and perform at their jobs until kind of one day they aren't. So we think about functional workaholism as it seems totally normal until you step away and get perspective. And then you look back and you say, I can't believe I was doing that. That's totally not healthy, or,
Or
some
not
health
normal.
problems. Yeah. And, or not, how I want to live in the future, right? It's a series of kind of decisions that you make that get you off on a path that maybe you might not want to be. So for me, it was confusing because I had started a company that was my dream job. It checked all the boxes, making a difference in people's lives, getting international travel and experience. We had great company culture, great folks. And, when I was just feeling less and less energy and more kind of resentment and just wasn't performing as well, that came as a big surprise to me. And it wasn't until I took time off that I realized that I was completely burnt out. And, the people around me knew that, right? When I suggested a sabbatical, they're like, yeah, that probably is a good idea.
I know you and I probably have read a lot of the same research, similar research. So we're very deep into this whole transformational way of living and working, right? It's completely different. Mm-hmm. Well, what I want to ask you is, how much do you think once you burn out, and I don't know if you can answer this question, to be honest with you, because you're young and you haven't gone down these too many phases down there yet, but do you believe that from a functional workaholism phase approach, you're doing something, you burn out, you take sabbatical, then you decide you want to do something else, and then you fall right back into the same behavioral pattern and you burn out and you do the exact same thing you did before, and then take another sabbatical what's the strategy here? Every 7 years? What do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I definitely feel like one of the learnings that I had on my sabbatical, I did like a walking pilgrimage, and I realized that I was walking really, and I was taking it very seriously, walking very quickly, passing people, was going to finish in the amount of time that I thought I should finish in. And I stopped about 2/3 of the way through, and I said, what am I doing here? Like I had to go to the hospital because my feet were messed up, and I'm like, why am I don't even have anything on the calendar after this. Why am I doing it this way? And so I said, I'm capping the number of kilometers that I'm walking per day. I'm not going to have this happen again. And then I wasn't able to do that. And so I still, finished the amount of time that I wanted. And I was beating myself up about that. And then I had just like a different perspective around it, which is it's hard and maybe impossible to change who you are. But at least having that awareness and, which I think you can develop some sort of self-love, that you can use that as a superpower instead of something that takes you down. Right. So I decided to apply that way that I work towards some other stuff, mission focused. I worked with a nonprofit that I'd been on the board of after I got back from my sabbatical. So yeah, I mean, I think some people are just kind of wired that way, where they're going to attack something in a way that's not going to be super healthy and balanced. So you can at least know about it, not beat yourself up, and have that commitment device to take time off on occasions so that you can kind of have a pressure release valve. But I do think that for a lot of folks, they get into it unwittingly, and the way they worked and the type of job they were in was mainly because of what their peers were doing, what their parents said they should do, and they hadn't actually made an intentional choice and stepped back and learned something about themselves. And so the sabbatical gave them a chance to make a pretty significant shift, either in what they did or how they approached work. So I do think it's possible to not have this unending cycle of burnout, though I feel like technology and everything is making it tougher.
Yeah,
but
and the reason
it's not going to be everyone's story.
Yeah, the reason I'm asking you this is because, I mean, a lot of what my personal experience has been also observing. I mean, I live on the beach. I see people who get stressed out on their vacations. They go on their sabbatical and they're like, I gotta fit in yoga and mountain biking and kiting session. And unless I do all three, I'm not happy. And it's just this frantic activity while they're on vacation. So sometimes that draw to do without that space to just be can be extremely addictive. And to your point, you take time off to learn a little bit about yourself, and at the same time, based on the logical levels of change of Greg Battison and Robert Dilts, unless you change your identity, you can't change your habits. Or changing your identity guarantees you're going to change your habits, but not necessarily the other way around. And so your point with sabbaticals is it gives people a chance to settle down and have time to think of who are they really, and what do they really want.
Yeah, exactly. There's something, every person who has taken a sabbatical has also taken a vacation, right? And so those people, I don't know how long it needs to be, but there's some amount of extended time where you're no longer doing something on vacation, you're being. I think we talked about that a little before in the green room. Like I think it's kind of impossible to just drop everything you're doing and just be present. You can ask my girlfriend. We have like a rule now that the first 72 hours of any vacation, like I know I'm going to be stressed out about like planning and making sure we get all this stuff and doing as much as possible. And so I've totally experienced that myself as well.
From what I've seen, this has, I mean, I know you're the research guy. My research is purely observing people, and I've seen it takes 8 days. 8 days for them to kind of suddenly like let go and relax. And I really watched this happen. We had no internet here in the first few years when I started to come home, which meant when I started to come here to Baja, which meant people couldn't connect to their devices. And the first 2-3 days, they're still connected to their phones, but they couldn't like connect, itchy, and it was really frustrating. And then towards the day 8 and 9, I would watch them just completely relaxed, and they didn't even want to touch their phones. And then it's time for them. Normally a normal vacation is like 10 days, right? And just when this like finally relaxed, they'll have to go home. Anyway, let's talk research about sabbaticals. What are you seeing? Is it still 70% of companies who have sabbatical policies, or is that changing thanks to your work?
Yeah, it sure seems like it's increasing. I mean, the problem in the States, there's no kind of centralized database. There's no reporting requirements. In the EU, it's easier to measure companies that have sabbaticals. They have to report this. So we're trying to collect the database on it. I was on the American Banker podcast a couple weeks ago, and they said that there's twice as many fintechs that are offering sabbaticals as before. So we're trying to collect that information. The definition's kind of slippery. So some company might say that 3 weeks of vacation is a sabbatical. I don't want to discourage any company from offering time off, but it feels like, that feels kind of like a vacation to me. But I mean, I think two things are happening. One, employees up until recently have had way more power in negotiating benefits and a lot of optionality, so they could push for these types of things. And two, because of the pandemic, just people's eyes, when they have their company hat on, are a lot wider to what the possibilities are. Like, oh, if almost every company in the world can be remote for a year, then there's a lot of other things that are possible. So I think the future is bright, but I think even more for companies than for individuals, they need it to make sense financially. And so I'm working with a couple tech companies right now who are doing kind of experiments. And it's interesting to think about, do they think just about short-term profits? Do they think about kind of medium-term recruiting and how people view them, what their constraints are? So trying to push that along.
Good job. Do you know, there's a country in Europe, and I'm drawing a blank right now which one it is. Is it Norway? There's a country that offers sabbaticals, the whole country.
Yeah, I want to say Finland or Norway, but yeah.
Finland or Norway, yeah. And they have extremely high level of startups.
Yep. Yeah, there's no shortage of examples of companies, countries, societies that offer some sort of extended leave like this. Obviously the US is just now getting on the parental leave train. And so it's just a matter of kind of elevating those stories so that people know about it, right? Like people think about hard workers as, Steve Jobs or Elon Musk, sleeping at the office. But Steve Jobs also took months off to study calligraphy, right? There's other aspects of these folks' story. Mark Benioff was on sabbatical from Oracle when he got the idea to start Salesforce. The Impossible Foods CEO was on sabbatical. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stories here that just aren't the norm yet.
Yeah, I think maybe 24% of tech startups were born on a vacation. I don't know necessarily about
Really?
sabbaticals, but yeah, it's pretty high. All right, let's take it personal. Pluses, minuses, fears, breakthroughs. If somebody's considering a sabbatical, when is the right time to take a sabbatical? What are some of the main fears and concerns people have?
I think that one issue that folks have when I talk about taking sabbaticals is they assume that I'm saying that anyone can take a sabbatical right now. And that's not true, right? I mean, financially, logistics, responsibilities. And so when the right time to take it, is very personal, and it depends on where you are, financially, right? And so I would say, if you can set a time 3 to 5 years in the future where you say, I have no idea what I'm doing January 2027, and then you build towards that, then it becomes much more realistic for many folks. As far as broadly what time in people's lives, one of the kind of core theses of the book is that I think there are inflection points over the course of our lives that most people share and experience, like kind of gap year between high school and college or early in your career, when you kind of meet your partner, if it's a long honeymoon, or when you decide to have kids before that, when your kids are at a certain age, when you're contemplating retirement. There's these things that most folks experience that are pretty big inflection points in our lives, but there's no cultural ritual to take time off and celebrate them or contemplate them. So, I would encourage people to think about what's like a thing that's coming up that you can mark. That's a transition or an important time in your life, and can you make space to really be present for that and to make the best of it? As far as pluses and minuses, I mean, as I think like when you create that space and you do extended leave, it's a lot tougher than people think. When you go on a retreat, right? Like this vacuum of all these stimulus disappears and all these like scaries and things flow in, right? Because you're thinking about all these memories and you're getting distracted. So similar with a sabbatical, you're probably dwelling on a lot more stuff that you weren't thinking of before because you were just busy. It can be difficult. It's hard to be on a different schedule than your community and your family and your coworkers. And you're gonna kind of encounter obstacles that, even though you're on essentially a vacation, that doesn't make them easier. But I think the benefits are pretty transformational. We talk about kind of coming back with more affirmation. So kind of like self-confidence, you're assured, you can set work-life boundaries better. Authenticity, you were talking about identity earlier. So whether you're doing kind of archaeology to uncover who you are, who you were, or you're actually like seeking who you want to be and trying to make changes. And then autonomy. So really feeling like independence and like a person that can kind of chart their own way through the world, as opposed to caring what other people think or making decisions based on the past, whatnot.
So DJ, believe it or not, I have never taken a sabbatical.
Oh no.
I have a little slightly different approach to all of this. I do believe that you can do the self-awareness piece simultaneously, right? To me, that's really critical to create that sustainable life, work, play design. But I have never taken a sabbatical, so that will be fixed in the future. You familiar with Stefan Sagmeister?
Yep. Yeah.
And I really liked. So for those of you who aren't, he's a creative branding guy, and and he decided that at the height of his agency, actually a year into opening his agency, he decided to take a sabbatical because he saw that his creativity was dwindling, which is what happened with me, right? My creativity started dwindling, and I realized that I need to, and so I did a drastic change in my life, but that wasn't. It was a 10-day vacation really that jump started. It wasn't a sabbatical. But I really liked his approach where he says, instead of, looking at our career as like working all the time, work, and then retire, is to introduce a little bit of these years further down the road, earlier in your life, so that you can take have the amazing benefits that you're talking about earlier in your life, and who knows where that's going to take you. You may pivot your career, you may continue with the same career, right? But it re-energizes you. So do you think that would be the way of the future? Is that kind of what you're pushing people to consider?
I think that a world where everyone routinely can take extended leave, right? So it has to be available for people of all socioeconomic backgrounds, which means companies have to offer it, governments have to offer support, is one where people are living kind of more authentic, courageous lives focused on things that matter to them and things that matter to the world. There's some indication that people emerge with a greater pro-social mindset, so caring about their community and the broader community. Anecdotally, you'll see folks that start to work on climate issues or something like that. So yeah, I think that in the same way that we all of a sudden decided, like, retirement is a new concept, right? All of a sudden we decided that you work until X years and then you never work again. I think we could just as easily say, let's sprinkle that into the course of your life, as Stefan says, and just see what happens. I think it's life is too short and precious, that we've seen in the past couple of years, to push everything to the future that you might never get to, as opposed to enjoying and being present more in the current times. I know that we spoke a little bit in the green room, and you might not have people asking you questions, but when your partner took his first sabbatical, did you see any changes take place in him? It obviously started a bit of a chain reaction as to how he, thought about work going forward. But what was the impression that you had?
So he took 4 months off, just for context, from a job, non-paid leave of absence, a non-paid sabbatical, and then would go back to the same job, right? So he already knew what he was doing. The changes in him that I noticed were vitality, energy. We were a lot closer. He was a lot happier. We were having a lot more fun. Just really living life, waking up to like this, what life is meant to be, right? And really stepping into experiences and adventures and doing all these things. Now, he's currently in the same, and this went on for years. Okay, he's currently resigned from his job, so he's currently on a sabbatical, right? Mm-hmm. Completely different situation. He's missing purpose.
Yeah.
And it's not easy right now because he's trying to figure out next step. He doesn't want to retire, right? He doesn't want to retire. He wants to do something, but he's not sure what he wants to do. And so, but we also know necessarily a sabbatical for us is, we're kind of at home, right? Maybe if we were traveling somewhere, things might be different because it's different kind of experience. Yeah. But what I'm saying, I keep coming back to the same thing. Whether you take a sabbatical or you're not taking a sabbatical, what's going on inside can only be fixed by you knowing what's going on inside. And so the self-awareness, the mindfulness, the understanding, what's your purpose, all these things. In my opinion, you don't need a sabbatical in order to get to the bottom of this. I think a sabbatical could be very easy, transformative experience because outside experience and stimuli in a different kind of environment makes your brain think differently. But it's not the only way to get there, right? That's what I'm saying. Now, with my husband, it's funny because I know everything but I can't help him. He needs to find it himself. Now, a lot of what he's seeking is already inside him, right? And so it's hard to sit on the side and kind of watch it. But all I can do is just be there for him. So, um, I was going to ask you.
No, I mean, just if I could respond, a couple things in there that I think are important is, number one, the context through which people take sabbaticals is very important, right? The time that it takes for people to unplug and de-stress and be happy when they have a sabbatical policy and they know they're coming back, or they're getting paid throughout it. Like, that's easy, right? You flip the switch, you're like, I don't have to worry about anything, no existential questions here, just
Right,
have fun. And it's
right,
very different when you've arrived at it and you're burnt out, or you like quit or got fired and there's uncertainty about the future. It takes a lot of initiative to say, like, I know I have these big questions, but I'm gonna set like a stake in the ground. I'm not gonna think about it until this date. Like, my partner was on sabbatical from her company last year. She had 2 months, and she was like, oh, I don't know, like, what am I going to do afterwards, and should I stay, am I going to go back? And I'm like, listen, you have to just tell yourself, as the thoughts come up, just dismiss them and say, I have a calendar invite for January 15th, and that is the day that I'm going to start thinking about it, and let the process kind of work.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
very hard. Otherwise, you're just kind of job searching, but in kind of a half-assed way.
Well, not just job searching, but it's exactly what I'm noticing with some of the people I'm speaking with. You can get, in a, lack of clarity, confidence, courage, stress, fear of uncertainty. All these things show up, right? And,
Yeah.
and this, so you can be on sabbatical and be just as stressed as if you're working.
Yeah. I mean,
You can feel guilty that you're not productive. I mean, there's a lot of emotions going on.
totally.
It's not, and I think sabbaticals are great. Don't get me wrong. Definitely not putting sabbaticals down. I'm just saying, being able to be in control of your emotions,
Yeah.
is a skill that is powerful, right? Because all that stress and uncertainty shows up.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that it made me think of when you described your husband is, I'm sure there's studies out there about this. I haven't seen them or done them, but from observing people, like, it sounds like, and you can imagine it when someone retires, right? It sounds like what he's experiencing might be more akin to people, how they feel when they retire, or like early retirement. It's like, oh, I have this opportunity to retire, or like, and then you're like, this is great. And then you kind of have all those anxieties creep in, and you're like, well, should I retire? Like, what am I going to do with the next phase of my life? There's really good programs out there. There's one at my alma mater, Notre Dame, that kind of has people in their like twilight career, they call it. And they come and they spend a year there, they audit classes, they meet people, and they just kind of think about, like, do I want to retire? What do I want to do? Is it a money-making endeavor? Is it volunteering? And it gives a little bit more structure around that decision, versus just kind of, you go from working all the time to being totally off, and you don't know how to deal with that. Like, we're not trained to deal with that.
Right. I mean, he's just as busy as might as well be working. But anyway, but to your point, I don't believe in retirement. If you're familiar with the blue zones, I don't believe in a retirement in the way of the retirement the way we know it. Like, you're working till 65 or 55, whatever it is, and then you retire, and then you do what? I do believe in having some kind of a purpose and calling in your life, and you do that till you die, until you can't do it anymore, right?
Yeah.
But that's easier said than done, because different professions and different skills and different vocations and all that stuff. So yeah, that's exactly where he's at. I know he'll find something. He's kind of experimenting around. Maybe I need to send him on a 2-month sabbatical to Japan or something away from here.
Well, I do think the fact you mentioned this, the fact that you're in like your home space, right? Not everyone has the ability or privilege to travel, but yeah, and I see this with my parents as well. Like, they're snowbirds, so they move to like warm weather and cold weather, and so because they're doing that, and because they're living in places that they want to live, they're less likely to take vacations. And I
Right.
think there's something about being outside of your geographic space. It lights you up. Everything's different, from what they call stoplights to like the language to the grocery stores. And I think it activates you in a different way that's hard to do in your routine life.
You're so spot on, because that's what we were doing. We were going between Tahoe and Baja, and at some point in time, I said we stopped traveling. And for a lot of people, that's traveling, right? But I'm like, no, we're just going from our house to our house back to our house. So it's not really traveling. Now, there is a novelty aspect in travel, right? And so that's why I told you we'll do some trips to mainland Mexico and put ourselves in a new situation, because I think that's important. Okay, well, I've taken a lot of your time. What is your advice for people who want to go explore more about sabbaticals and see if it's the right thing for them? How they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find us at the sabbaticalproject.org. You can find me on LinkedIn doing interviews like this and generally talking about sabbaticals, sharing people's stories. But, what I would encourage folks to do is just, if it's never occurred to you, or if you never felt like it's possible for you, like hopefully this conversation plants a seed that will germinate and grow over time. But, set a time that's far enough away that you don't have any plans for it, and just say like, all right, I'm going to clear these 3 months, and then see what it would be like to design your life around that and assume that that's what's going to happen. That's the best way to do it.
Thank you so much, DJ. And I told you I'll be launching a new program to just take people out of their comfort level and see if they can figure out that self-awareness piece and find that deep play in their day-to-day activity. So I'd love to invite you to come to that as well. And then we'll end up in Baja at some point in time for a real in-person experience. So I'm excited to do that with you. Okay. Thank you so much, DJ. When is your book going to come out? Or is that a question I shouldn't ask because I don't like when they ask me?
Yeah, the $1 million question. I can tell you it's not going to come out in 2022. So you can save up your money until later.
Fair enough. Yeah. I've been working online for 2 years, and I get it. Totally
Awesome.
get it. Thank you so much, DJ. So connect with DJ at thesabbatical.project.com.
Yeah, .com.org.
.org.com. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Great talking to you.
Thank you, DJ. Bye.